Thank you for being here. This is the City of Glendale special meeting of the Civil Service Commission. Today is April 21st, 2014, and the time is 5:33 in the afternoon. We are gathered in the council chambers in the City of Glendale. May I please have a roll call?
Commissioner Yakubian?
Yes.
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Chair Gazarian?
Here. Thank you. Next item, please.
Discussion regarding the Civil Service Commission rules as it pertains to a civil service employee's right to seek review by the Civil Service Commission of a performance-based transfer.
Thank you. Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I've been told that the staff from the City Attorney's Office was unable to be here this evening due to a AB 1234 training class being presented this evening. And I think it would be appropriate to continue this item if they cannot be here to address the various aspects of this topic, as well as item number 3.
Thank you for that. Before I yield the floor to my fellow commissioners, may I ask, when you say you've been told, who has told you this matter?
Mr. Chair, I've been informed by both the City Attorney and the City Manager on this.
Thank you. I yield to the commissioners if there's any comments. Yes?
I move to postpone or reschedule the meeting at a later date.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Well, actually, before we take a vote, I would like to comment with respect to this turn of events.
Go ahead.
Well, it was extremely difficult for me personally to be here today because of a very busy trial calendar and an upcoming federal court trial. And after considerable amount of email traffic, I freed up this time at considerable expense to myself, my practice, and my family to be here. And I don't particularly appreciate the way that it's been handled. If it could not have happened, then I would have liked to be timely informed of that, not be here at 5:35 convened with my fellow commissioners and be told that the city attorney's office is unavailable. I think that's disrespectful of my time and my commitment. As we all know, this is a voluntary position, and I would like things to be handled a little bit more professionally, personally. I do not speak for anyone else, of course.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just have a question. Was this item calendared prior to the email discussions, or was it the second item? Mr. Doyle, was this item calendared prior to the email discussions of this past weekend regarding this matter?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hatamian, this, as you know, this agenda was posted, I believe, early Friday morning.
Thursday night.
With these items.
It was posted Thursday night.
Thursday night, and again, it was posted appropriately, and the information I received about the lack of availability of the attorney staff was conveyed to me over the weekend, and so I was in a hearing all day today, but I certainly could have conveyed that to the commissioners, but my apologies if this has disrupted anyone's schedules.
For clarification, Commissioner Hatamian, when you refer to emails the last week regarding this matter, I want to make the record clear. Those emails were solely and only for purposes of scheduling this special meeting. There was no substantive discussion as to any subject matter that is agendized.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the schedule was posted Thursday night. However, when did you or when did the city become aware that the commission wanted to meet on this meeting? Was it earlier last week? Was it the week before? Because I was CC'd on the emails later on in the process. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is if the city had noticed at some point prior to Thursday night, was this AB 123 training that the city attorney and the city manager are attending or are part of, scheduled before or after, or?
Commissioner Hatamian, this AB 1234 training has been set for quite some time, probably a month.
A month?
The attempt to schedule a special meeting was pursued by the chair in the course of last week, and there was an initial attempt to schedule it on Thursday evening, last Thursday evening, which conflicted with the televised schedule of a Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and that couldn't be arranged. And then this was an alternate choice as pursued by the Chairman Gazarian. But
Yeah.
the training had been scheduled long ago.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. And again, for me, when I was brought in on the emails, this is the first time I'm hearing of the AB 123 training being the reason for this continuance. In the email discussions, and I'm not privy to sharing everything. That's up to the chair if he wants to do that. These reasons are being presented to me now, and so yeah, I'm just trying to echo Commissioner Yakubian's concerns. There are many people in the audience. We all made it to this hearing. You're here, and so again, it's one of those things where, with our times, we can always get ourselves into whether it's a case that we have to prep for, whether it's a class that we're teaching, our evening obligations to our families, those types of things. And it would have been good if we had a little bit of notice prior to just right now that this matter is to be continued because of a training class that the city has scheduled for 2 members who are parties to this matter. And so those are just my comments.
Commissioner Hatamian, may I also elaborate? Again, this training class is one that's being presented to all boards and commissions in compliance. It's the ethics training that all boards and commissioners are required to attend. That is the city attorney's staff is there. I think some reference was made to the city manager. The city manager, whether we wanted him here tonight or not, he teaches a class at USC every Monday night. So if there's some question as to why he's not here, that would be why he's not here.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. It begs the utterance, as you know, I'm the dean of a law school and I teach Monday night criminal law. But I'm not going to get into that. I do want to clarify, however, you referenced a remark attributed to me, and you quote stated pursued by Chairman Gazarian as to this evening's meeting. I want the record to be clear that my pursuit of such a special meeting was at the behest of other commissioners. So it was really, though the rules provide, Rule 12, Section 2, subsection B, that the chair may call for a special meeting, it was in fact the chair, in concurrence with a majority of the commissioners, if not all at the time, who had sought for the special meeting that I had espoused to arrange with your offices. Having said that, you also stated that there's training that was already set. Is that why I do not have my regularly scheduled Commission Counsel, Ms. Varbetian, here as well?
I believe so, Mr. Chair, but I'm not certain of that.
Okay. Very well. If there's no further discussion, I think there is a motion that is duly seconded. I would like to take a roll call as to that motion. I do believe that the parties, and in this case, it is the city that I would have liked to have be present and express their opinion and their position with respect to a memorandum of understanding, with respect to a memorandum that was actually provided to us by our regularly scheduled Commission Counsel, Ms. Varbetian. Absent their presence here, it is really not possible or probably useful for us to discuss that memo without having the party that we wish to address and inquire as to issues that may or may not be of concern to any member of this commission that are contained in that memo. Having said that, do you have any idea as to a date that the city will be available to appear before the commission as to this agenda is item number 1?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I don't have the calendars of the parties that would be involved, and my sense is it would involve Mr. Garcia, Ms. Moreno, and Ms. Maurer, perhaps, in addition to our regular council. So I can't answer that question. But again, I would assume a regularly scheduled commission meeting would suffice, and that would provide proper notice to them to clear their schedules.
Well, I'm not going to split hairs as to what would suffice or what wouldn't, because obviously we have set a special hearing because we thought there's an urgency from our end to address something sooner rather than later. But that's not something to be belabored at this moment. So you don't have a date in mind. The motion is, I believe Commissioner Manukian's motion is seconded. With respect to continuing this, though to rather a date uncertain, so it would be really not a continuance, it's taking it off calendar.
Correct.
Would you care to amend that motion?
Amended, so amended. I mean, are we giving a new date, or are we, or you were asking for it to be rescheduled at the earliest next availability? How, or are we just removing it from calendar? How do you, either way I can make that motion.
Well, by way of discussion, all commissioners ought to be reminded, and I am reminding you, that currently there is a regularly scheduled meeting on April 23rd wherein these agenda items have been placed there, though I had asked for a special meeting for this evening. They had gone ahead in a crosswire of 4 p.m. in the afternoon versus 4:03 p.m., one receiving an email while the other one sending. It is currently scheduled for Wednesday, April 23rd on a regularly scheduled hearing. Is that correct, Mr. Doyle?
Yes, sir.
So the motion that I make, I'll make the motion to remove it from calendar.
Has this already been set on the April 23rd
Yes.
calendar?
Yes.
Do we have confirmation that the parties are going to show on that date, Mr. Doyle?
I do not, but I would assume that they would be available.
Yeah, for the record, I won't be here.
No one has told me that they would not be available.
Are my commissioners available on that date, given that it is the eve of the 99th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide commemorative events in the region?
I'm not. I will not be attending. But
Ms. Yakubian?
I don't think so.
Okay. Mr. Hatamian?
It's not going to be possible.
Well, I will not be having a quorum even if I disregarded my duties as an American Armenian, or an Armenian American for that matter.
Or if we can put it on the next regularly scheduled meeting.
When is the next regularly scheduled meeting, Mr. Doyle?
I believe it's May 4th.
12th.
Okay.
May 14th.
May 14th. May I ask that you amend your motion to?
Sure. I'll amend my motion to reschedule for May 14th.
Is there any interest in having that be the date and no earlier date than that date to be the final choice and the desire of this commission?
I mean, one option would be we make that motion, set it for that date, and if an earlier date is available that you guys decide you want and everybody's available, we can always...
I am going to ask that the majority of the commission undertake a request for another special meeting, having gone through a week of back and forth. I'm just notifying you, fellow commissioners, if any of you desires to have a special meeting earlier than May 14th, I expect you to speak on behalf of the majority of the commission or communicate that majority interest to me, and if so, I will go down that path once again.
If I can finish what I was, I agree with you. I would like to have a special meeting, but I don't want to come here and be alone. So if it means having another special meeting and be here by myself, I would prefer get a confirmation for the next event.
Do we know if the city is available on May 14th, Mr. Doyle?
Well, actually, before we go down
I'm
that
sorry,
road,
go ahead.
can I suggest or can I request that Mr. Doyle provide us with a date where the parties will be available prior to the May 14th date? That would fit with everyone's schedule, classes, training, logistics, television, budget, and whatnot?
Members of the commission, I can make an inquiry of that. If there's a desire to do this prior to May 14th?
I mean, the answer may be that there just isn't, but if there is any possibility, then in light of the fact that we are all here and so deem this urgent, May 14th is almost a month away.
May I ask that we adjourn while you attempt to see if you can get confirmation as to a date prior to May 14th?
Sure. Again, I want to remind you, there are other commission meetings, there are council meetings, which conflict with, almost every day of the week, so that might be challenging, but...
No, I know, but we don't have to have the meeting in this chamber, obviously. We can have it anywhere in the city, and I believe our city facilities are vast, that room can be provided for us, provided the city is available prior to May 14th, and I don't know if they are.
Sure. Well,
Yes.
what I would suggest is, at least for not making people wait, we need to reschedule this in any situation. So why don't I make a motion that we reschedule this at a next available meeting that everyone is available, either a special meeting or our regular meeting, whichever one, as long as we have some kind of confirmation that all the vested parties will be attending. That's all.
Respectfully, that is a vague motion. It ought to be continued to a date certain, and if it's May 14, then May 14 is a date certain.
Fine. My motion is to reschedule this for May 14.
I'll second that.
Okay. May we have roll call?
Commissioner Yakubian,
No.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatamian,
No.
Commissioner Manukian,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, because they need to be here to be heard. Yes, I want to hear from them. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Discussion regarding the request by council for Sergeant Vahag Mardikian, Council Mr. Goldwasser, for review by the Civil Service Commission of the 5% pay reduction as a result of the performance-based transfer of his client.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, similar to the last item, I would recommend that this too be moved to the May 14th, the 2014 regular meeting of the Civil Service Commission, as again the main parties involved, legal staff, are unable to be here this evening.
I do see Sergeant Mardikian here. I don't know if that is Mr. Goldwasser. It is. Good evening, sir. Thank you. So what is your suggestion, Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, I recommend that this item, along with item number 2, be re-agendized for May 14th, 2014, the regularly scheduled meeting.
Is that a date available to you, Mr. Goldwasser?
It is available to me, sir. I spoke with the city attorney.
Can you please step to the podium so that your voice will pick up? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I believe I met you in December, most of you. I spoke to the city attorney who's assigned to the commission regarding the issue. She advised me that she would be preparing a memo, and I asked whether or not I could see it. To answer your question, I'm available on May 14th, and will try to make myself available, as I did tonight, at an earlier time if that is the commission's wish. My request is I would like to see a copy of the memo that was given to you regarding our issue.
Very well, thank you. That memo is an attorney-client work product. We hold the privilege. I will ask of my commissioners if there is a motion to waive that privilege so that you may see it, because we will be discussing that memo and any issues that may or may not arise from that memo.
I would like to hear from our council to see if there are any issues if we were to release this memo.
That's
Yeah,
not
I
a
would
good
as
look.
well.
So,
first of all, Mr. Kazarian is correct. The commission holds the privilege. The commission can waive the privilege. Whether there are issues with regard to waiving the privilege and providing it to Mr. Goldwasser, that would be, I think, a question for the city attorney to answer. I did not draft the memo. I was counsel for the commission, legal advisor for the commission with respect to Mr. Mardikian's appeal of his demotion. I was not the one who provided the opinion, and nor do I have the general capacity to provide advice and counsel to the commission with respect to all issues in front of it, such as does it have the jurisdiction to hear an appeal of Mr. Mardikian's transfer. My role is to serve as legal advisor with respect to hearings and to answer other questions that are delegated to me by the city attorney. The question of whether the commission has jurisdiction to hear an appeal of Mr. Mardikian's transfer has not been delegated to me. If it is, I'll answer that question, but I don't think I'm in the position to answer the question of whether there are downsides to releasing the memo to Mr. Goldwasser. I think that the city attorney, that question should be put to the city attorney.
Well, thank you for that expression of opinion, Mr. Kowalski, but I do recall at the outset you indicated that, and I quote, Mr. Kazarian is correct, the privilege is held by the commission as to the memo. With respect to asking the city attorney whether or not he would like that memo to be released, it would appear that we would be asking the supervisor of the commission counsel, Ms. Varbetian, who I believe is the author of that memo, for the benefit of the commission, and the commission holds the privilege as to that work product. It would seem to me that it is a bit of a conflict of interest for me to be asking the city attorney whether or not I can release something that the commission holds the privilege, given the fact that the memo itself will give rise to discussion that may or may not affect a party to it, the city. So it would be odd for me to ask that of the city attorney. That's why we have commission counsel to answer the question, which I thought you answered correctly, by the way, and that is that the privilege is held with the commission. Yes.
Okay. I think I'm more confused. So was that a yes or a no?
It was neither, Sam.
So if this council has a legal question, and we have legal representation, and we ask that question, and if you can't answer it, I'm confused.
So under the charter, the city attorney provides advice to the city and all its constituent departments and commissions. City attorney can delegate that authority to outside counsel. The city attorney has delegated the authority to advise the commission with respect to evidentiary hearings. So that's why I act in that role with respect to hearings that arise. But I don't have any general capacity either by charter or by contract to answer other legal questions that may arise, which is why Mrs. Varpetian was the one who provided the opinion, which is why the city attorney's office would ordinarily answer the question of whether the commission has jurisdiction to hear an appeal. Now,
Forgive me. Order, please. I need to stop you from discussing merits of item number 2. Because even to pose the question, it causes me concern. I'll tell you why. Because I intend, as I have in the past, with respect to matters that have come before this commission, brought by Sergeant Mardikian, I intend to recuse myself. And I intend to do that again when the matter comes up for proper discussion with the parties present. And with the utmost respect to you, Mr. Kowalski, if you recall, I communicated with you and asked you to be present, and I'm grateful that you are present. But for your presence, we would have no counsel advising us. But would you not agree that as to agenda item number 2, the city is a party to that item? And the city being a party to that item, whether or not that, as you say, the 5% is reduction, not reduction, whatever, how could the city advise me if I can release a memo that I have been provided by city-appointed counsel for me as guidance, a guidance that is almost akin to a tentative ruling that I'm being asked to adopt, which would be by necessity one that I would be obliged to share it with the parties for them to know where the commission is coming from, if we indeed adopt the memo as gospel, or where the commission is being asked to go by its counsel, Ms. Varbetian.
So, just as Ms. Varpetian addressed the question, the legal question contained in that memo, insofar as the city attorney has the authority to advise the commission unless that role is delegated, it seems to me that in that sense, the city attorney is providing its advice with respect to a matter, and I don't believe that the city is a party or the city attorney has a conflict of interest preventing it from answering that question. Again, I said, as I noted, if the city attorney wants to give me a broader role with respect to answering this question, I'd be happy to provide a second opinion. If the city attorney wants to delegate this issue to me, then I'd be happy to address it. But it hasn't been delegated to me. I did not know that Ms. Varpetian would not be here tonight. As I arrived, I came at your request, but there was no discussion beforehand. There were no preconditions. There were no discussion of what my role would be, and I just want to be clear that my role contractually is to provide advice with respect to hearings. I will take on a greater role to the extent that role is assigned to me, but pursuant to the charter, my understanding is that's the city attorney's role until his office delegates it elsewhere.
I know you have a question, but I need to follow up. I sent you the memo and all of the exhibits, Mr. Kowalski, and I'm glad, as I said earlier, that you are here and you accepted the request for you to be present. In coming here, and you had indicated you wanted to be up to speed, would it be correct to say that you were prepared to have this item 2 be discussed and for you to provide counsel and guidance if need be?
Yes, if the city attorney authorizes me to do so. It has not, that has not been done to this point.
I see. So you did not seek a specific authorization, but you came as a courtesy to my request, and I sent you the several pages of exhibits attached to the memo for your review. All of it, you came, but you were not prepared to guide us if need be. You'd have to go and ask.
I'm prepared upon the city attorney's approval, and as I noted, I'm here for 2 reasons. 1, because you asked me to be here, but
yes.
2, because I serve as legal advisor with respect to the commission in the underlying appeal as to Mr. Vardikian's demotion. And some of the issues raised, and again, I'll stop myself
you need an attorney?
from discussing anything in the memo, but there obviously is a history going back to a lengthy appeal process wherein I thought there might be some value in my prior capacity.
So do you think you spoke out of turn despite the fact that it was a correct statement that you made when the question was posed to you whether or not this commission has the authority to release a memo because this commission is the holder of the privilege? And I believe you said that I was correct, that this commission does hold the privilege. There's been an interest in releasing the memo to one party versus another party, which you don't think there's a conflict. I don't know how you reach that conclusion, because obviously there's 2 sides and they disagree with one another. So are you now withdrawing your affirmative statement that in fact this commission holds the privilege? Is that what you're doing or not?
No, I'm not, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. That was a statement of black letter law. I was just agreeing with you that this is the rule of evidence, and that's the extent to which
Thank you.
my statement.
I'm satisfied. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry for the delay.
Actually, my question is much more discreet, and I think that's how Chair Gazarian started out, and I think that, Mr. Kowalski, you expanded the purview of what the request was. Taking this memorandum in a vacuum, someone has made a request for it, it's a privileged document, it's come from an attorney to the commission. In a vacuum, without examining at all the substance of it, can the commission waive the privilege? I mean, it's really just an evidentiary question. It really doesn't matter who it's about or what it says. And at least I, for one, am not asking you to opine in any way with respect to that. And I respect what you've said with respect regarding your the parameters of what you are tasked to do and retained to do by the city attorney's office. But it is really a simple evidentiary question. This privileged document, so a party has made a request for it. Does the commission have the right and the ability to provide it to this other side, waiving the privilege or not? And if
And I've answered that question already. The answer is yes.
okay.
I have another question, Chair. Sorry, whenever you're done.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And this question could be posed to fellow commissioners. I'm not an attorney. Most of you guys are, but does the attorney that prepared that document, does that person need to be here in order to have a say in the release of that document? I don't know how that works.
I'm going to ask Mr. Kowalski to respond because I do have the answer, but his presence is here for a reason, so we'll hear from him first.
Well, no, that party does not need to be here, but the earlier question that the chair asked was, are there downsides to releasing the memo? That's a question.
I don't think I asked if there were any downsides. I just said, do we have the right to waive the privilege because we are the holder of the privilege?
Mr. Chair, I seem to pretty clearly recall you asking a question along those lines. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Downside? I mean, the record speaks for itself, but I haven't even thought of a downside.
Okay, well, so that I understood you to be asking for my opinion on whether there are downsides to releasing the memo, and I guess perhaps I misunderstood your question.
I think I may have mischaracterized it for you to understand it that way. That was not my intention at all.
Okay, let me
I
just
assure you.
try to, with your permission,
Sure.
Mr. Chair, try to clarify Sam's question. He was wondering whether or not the person who created this document holds that privilege to release this document. Does Lucy have to be present, Ms. Farpetian? It's a yes or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
And Mr. Kowalski, I thank you for your answer, and I thank you for clarifying that we hold the privilege in releasing the documentation. This is kind of, it comes in two folds for me. The second part of this is, do you agree that the city is a party to this matter?
To what matter?
To this matter that's before us that we're considering.
The city attorney properly.
Not the city attorney, the city itself.
The city attorney, on behalf of the city, properly rendered an opinion on whether the commission has jurisdiction to hear an appeal of Mr. Mardikian's transfer.
Okay. Is the city a party to this case? That's my question.
Is the city a party to what?
To this case that we're hearing. It's Mr. Mardikian and
to Mr. Mardikian's request for an appeal of his transfer.
Yes. Is the city a
yes.
party? Yes. Does the city attorney's office represent the city?
The city attorney's office, no. The city attorney's office was rendering an opinion, giving an opinion to the commission as to whether it had jurisdiction to hear the appeal. There's nothing for the city to represent. There's nothing for the city attorney to represent the city in. The city attorney was advising the commission with respect to whether it had jurisdiction to proceed with a hearing on the appeal as to Mr. Mardikian's transfer.
Okay. And I'm trying to go back to your earlier advice in regards to the commission going to the city attorney's office to obtain the permission to release this document. Do you see any potential conflicts in that, in your opinion?
No, I don't. I think that you're asking a sort of strategic question to the city attorney. The city attorney would provide you with the pros and cons of doing that if you want that advice. I'm not saying you have to get it or not.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a suggestion. It's not. I think it's very unfair. We've asked people from the audience to be here. It's bad enough that we're not going to have the items. At least let's come to a conclusion on which way. If we're going to release the document, let's take a vote on it. However.
Thank you. Go ahead. Well, being the only non-attorney on this dais, I'm going to approach it. Oh, I'm sorry. We got two of them. I'm going to approach it from a little different standpoint, and that's what I call fairness. We have a document that's marked confidential, attorney-client privilege. We've heard that we have the authority to waive that attorney-client privilege. In my reading of this document, it really contains nothing that I see as a layperson that will hurt anyone. It's really a statement of facts. It's a timeline. It shows what happens. And I think that anybody that's interested in this case should be able to see this by the time we're ready to hear the case, so that we're on a level playing field. Everybody knows what we're going to be talking about. So with that thought, I think I would make the motion that we waive attorney-client privilege and allow this document to be released.
Any second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes. Thank you. The document will be released, and out of an abundance of caution, Mr. Doyle, I would ask that you hand deliver on behalf of the commission the memo to the city as well, and I don't mean to Ms. Barbetian, but rather those who will be heard from whenever this matter is heard, at your earliest opportunity. As for
Mr. Chair, does that include all the attachments to the memo as well?
No, I believe the confidential item is the attorney-client privilege memo, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Is that my correct understanding?
The attachments are all already public record. They can be pulled out of the file. So I'm saying this to 4 pages, and perhaps anybody interested could be referred to Mr. Doyle's office to obtain copies of it. So there's a central place where they can get copies of this memo.
Right. Well, Mr. Doyle,
I thought we were voting on just releasing it to the other party, or are we making? Is that?
No.
That was.
we're releasing it because if we waive the privilege, we're waiving the privilege.
Oh, okay.
What is your understanding? Is this are we making this a public document or not?
Well, I was going to release it to the other party, to the.
Okay.
And that was it.
Okay. So then the reference to having something at Mr. Doyle's office.
That they would go to Mr. Doyle to get the copy of the document.
Well, yes, but Mr. Goldwasser is here. He could be handed a copy by Mr. Doyle, and the city attorneys, I believe, share the same building with Mr. Doyle's office.
Because at least my take on, I wanted to be released to Smardikian, and that I don't know if, I just want a clarification that it's not being open to the entire public, is it? Or is it?
You know, once a document is in the possession of someone and we have waived the privilege, they can proceed with it and do with it as they see fit. That is my understanding of the law. I'm pretty confident in that understanding, and Mr. Kowalski can tell me otherwise.
It's their choice. I mean, that's my understanding.
Very well.
Okay.
Right. Unless there's some sort of protective order prohibiting the dissemination of the document in some way, they're free to do with it as they will. Now, I'm not 100% certain that everything in all the attachments in the memo.
We're not giving attachments. The attachments are public record to begin with.
May I?
Yes.
May I ask Mr. Goldwasser to not to publicly disseminate the memorandum and to use it only for the purpose of his litigation?
I am not going to agree with my fellow commissioner's request. I think it's inappropriate once Mr. Goldwasser has it, just like once the city has it, they can do with it as they see fit. Otherwise, tying their hands behind their back and giving them a memo and blinding them with a blindfold is not the intent of waiving the privilege. That would be my opinion.
No, I mean, I want to give it to them, let them decide what they want to do with it. That was my, that was,
Because you're asking for a protective order orally, and I'm not prepared to
just a
support that.
I agree.
It's fine.
Let them do with it what Mr. Goldwasser
Yeah.
and do what he wants.
exactly. It's Mr. Mardikian's information, let him.
And Mr. Chair, the entire document or just the
Just-
original?
Just a memo.
4
Page
pages.
memo, no exhibits.
No exhibits, no. A document that ends with C.C. Matt Doyle, Chief Examiner.
Okay.
Did we agree, did we take a vote to put
Yeah.
this also on the same date?
We did not.
No, we
yet.
did not.
I'm sorry.
On item,
Is there a motion to
Agreed.
continue this to May 14th as the previous item?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, and thank you for being here, Mr. Goldwasser. Thank you. I believe there is no other business before this commission on this specially set meeting. May we be adjourned? A motion to adjourn?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.